Good morning, brethren. It's so good to see you today. It's exciting for us as the shepherds of the flock here to share with you some of the plans that we've been working for with some of your help and input as well for the last several months. It's exciting to talk about something that has really required a lot of work and effort, and we're very thankful that you have allowed us to serve this way. Thank you for allowing us to serve as shepherds of this congregation. We're so grateful for each of you, thankful for your help and your trust and all of your encouragement. Your prayers are so much appreciated. We'd like to thank you for also the dedication that you've shown in this last year. We have been striving as a theme of this last year to set aside the sin that may entangle us and really become effective servants of God and really become those Christians that we ought to be. We thank you for completing the surveys, those that gave us input and feedback. Your suggestions help us tremendously as we make plans to be more effective in our roles and also more effective as we work together here. We have incorporated a lot of your feedback and some of the decisions that we believe will be beneficial to all of us. We want you to know that we're always available to you to talk about things. We are a family here, and we covet those times that we get to have conversations and talk about spiritual things, talk about things going on in your lives, talk about things that we may be able to do better as well. We'd like to take a few minutes here to introduce our theme, and I don't have the controller. Here we go. Introduce the theme for today and the remainder of this year for 2023. We want to talk about some teaching from God's Word. We want to talk about some shared goals that we want to have together and then review some ways that we can achieve those. First, we want to maintain and not take a step back. We want to continue doing the things that we've been doing that have been effective and beneficial as a congregation. And evangelism, edification, benevolence, those should continue. We want to keep worshiping God as effectively as we can when we're assembled together. We want to encourage and promote Bible class teaching for all the ages that assemble with us. We want excellence in those areas to really shine through. We also want to encourage and promote that we all attend and participate in the worship to the greatest degree we possibly can. Supporting those who are weak among us also, with those who are weak in the faith. We want to continue encouraging them, continue and disciplining every member, including ourselves, in maintaining our faithfulness to God. We want to encourage and promote all the various forms that we involve ourselves in evangelism. We want to bring others to Christ. Let's keep bringing others to Christ. We need to have both an inward focus among those here that are worshiping with us that may not have obeyed the gospel, but also those that are not part of us, an outward focus, and work on reaching those that may not know about the truth and know about the gospel that's there for them. We want to make opportunities for us to gather together outside of these four walls where we can get to know each other better. We want to make opportunities personally for those to happen among brethren outside of these walls as well. We want to continue to care for one another. And the way we can care for each other is to be informed about each other. So let's continue our participation in that loving way that we get together and member care after each assembly on Sunday and continue to reach out to those that are in need and provide for one another. We want to support the youth of the congregation. We want to keep supporting the youth devotionals that go on. We want to continue to be diligent in the efforts that we have undertaken in the past. But without detracting from those present efforts, we believe we should make an effort to engage every single member in some form of evangelism, some form, for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of the kingdom. And we want to be encouraged and mature in the faith, and we want to enable us to participate more greatly in that aspect of this congregation's work individually. We believe that we should be assisting other men to grow, to become Bible class teachers, those that are not serving as deacons or don't qualify as of yet to become qualified and serve in those roles of deacons. We want those to purposefully commit to really qualifying to serve as shepherds in the future as well. We believe we should be bold in preaching the gospel here. We want to continue those things. So let's look at some of the previous themes that we've had in the past when we started really unfolding themes on an annual basis. We've talked about love more and give more, becoming like Christ, arise and build, one heart, one soul, Christ my King, free from sin and servants to God, and this year turning the world upside down. When we have themes like this, it doesn't exclude all the other things that we're supposed to be doing as a whole, right? It's just a focus area. So we want to give particular focus this year to turning the world upside down. As you see written in your trifold, you've gotten one of those when you came in. You'll see a passage of Scripture on the inside of that trifold. And one of the principles taught in that passage, in Acts 17, verses 2 through 3, it says, "And Paul went in, as was his custom, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, and saying, 'This Jesus whom I proclaim to you is the Christ.'" In the context of the passage, the gospel message preached here to the Jews in Thessalonica caused a great uproar. And the accusation was made against the Christians and those that were, in their view, harboring them by saying, "These who have turned the world upside down have come here too." This accusation made by the Jews in its premise was, in their perspective, it was true, but it wasn't really right. The gospel was really turning their worldview upside down. But in actuality, the gospel being preached turns the world right side up. It makes it what God wants it to be. It brings people into fellowship with Him. The gospel is a message that brings peace. It brings order to the lives of those who obey it and live it. It makes things right. It makes things the way that God wants them to be. So by the grace of God, this new way of life has brought about our holiness, and it will lead us to living with God in heaven for eternity. I want that. I know everyone here wants to be with God for eternity. We want heaven. If we believe this, we have an obligation, both by direct commandment from our Lord, but also as a result of just sheer gratitude to our God that we share this gospel message with others. It should just be part of our DNA. It's who we are. It's what we do. We want to focus this year on continuing to share the message of the gospel, proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ to everyone we possibly can this year. And we need everyone in the entire congregation to be involved in the effort to the degree that you can, to the degree that your spiritual maturity will allow with the opportunities that you have. So we're going to talk more about this here. I'm going to hand the baton over to Tim now.
This year, beginning the first Sunday in February, and each first Sunday thereafter, Lord willing, Ben or whoever is preaching that day will deliver a lesson that will be particularly well suited to invite your neighbors and friends or family to attend our worship services that day. We'll remind you about these special days in coming weeks. Let's take an opportunity the first Sunday of each month, starting in February, as a special point to invite your friends, neighbors, and family. In an effort to help us keep the theme at the forefront of our minds this year, we, with the very heavy involvement of Cody and Ben and Troy, prepared this trifold which you have in your hand. Included in this trifold is our daily Bible reading schedule, the adult Bible class schedule, the dates for special Bible study series and congregational singings, gospel meetings, and things like that. We're going to go through all of that this morning with you. You can find these on the foyer tables as you exit at any time. Please mark your calendars now. Take an opportunity to mark your calendars now to be present at all these special events, Bible studies, gospel meetings, and singings that you possibly can. You'll notice that our daily Bible reading this year, and you'll find that on the right tab as you open up your trifold here, will be focused on reading through the New Testament. We'll continue Memory Verse Roundup again this year. A lot of you have been involved in that effort whereby our young are learning memory verses. We'll continue that this year, and we'll be committing to memory a verse that's focused on motivating us to teach others the gospel, or it might be a core message about the gospel. We'll continue to recite these verses together each Sunday at the beginning of our Bible classes for all ages. So we want to reiterate these memory verses. They're actually very critical to the theme this year. So let's conduct and recite these at the beginning of all of our Bible classes at all ages. Also, the scripture readings this year during our worship assemblies will be coming from the book of Acts with an emphasis on personal evangelism. As part of our focus to teach others the gospel this year, we plan to study from God's Word in some areas we believe will help contribute to our success. We want each individual Christian in our congregation to set personal goals for evangelism that are big and bold, maybe bigger and bolder than you may originally feel comfortable with. We want all of us to stretch ourselves this year by doing some things that we may have never done before in this area of evangelism. Here's a few things to consider. Invite your family members and friends and neighbors to both worship with us, and we talked about that, the special session on the first Sunday of each month, or to study the Bible with you or someone else in the congregation. We have a number of people here who are involved in personal Bible studies, and we want to add to that number. Hand out invite cards to as many people as possible. You find those cards on the tables back in the foyer. Might be your waiter at your restaurant or the grocery store attendant or someone that you have some association with. Set a goal to hand out at least 5 of those cards each week. Practice teaching the gospel to another member of your own family and vice versa. That would help build confidence in spreading the gospel message. You may or may not be aware that this congregation has a website called texasbiblestudy.com. And we receive almost every day at least one lead from someone who's gone to that website and they've said, I want to study the Bible. I want to go to an individual class or study or a group class. These are individuals who are seeking someone to study with and seeking to learn more about the gospel. They've come to us through this electronic means. We currently almost have more leads incoming than we have people to respond to those leads. So we're looking for additional volunteers. Please come to one of the elders and say that you'd like to be a part of that effort, to be a part of that group. Brethren, we need to continue to break down barriers that may have prevented us from sharing the gospel in the past. We need to set aside the fear that we have that somebody might say, what somebody might think, or what someone might do. The gospel message is so powerful, and ultimately it doesn't rely upon how smart we are, how effective we are at delivering the message. It really just depends upon us making the effort. We need to ask people to study the Bible or work with somebody else to study the Bible. We need to talk with one another about strategies and past conversations with unbelievers, doctrinal questions, etc. And we constantly need to think about this question. What would we want someone to say to us if the roles were reversed? If we were the ones who were lost and in sin? Wouldn't we want them to not keep the message of the gospel secret, but to share the message? Let's constantly think about that question. What would we want someone to say to us if our roles were reversed? We really want to measure the impact that we're having in this community, so we want to see more personal Bible studies. We have a number of going on right now, but more people involved, and ultimately more people being brought to Christ. We really want to see each and every capable individual of this body to grow in this activity in 2023. We'd like to see everyone who is capable involved to spread the gospel message. We need to cast off those things that are interfering with our time. We always say we don't have time for that, right? I'm too busy. But think about this question for a moment. If we really believe that God is the most important priority in our lives, then why is it that other activities get more of our time than this activity? A balanced life is not one where your career or your sports or your children's sports or your hunting or fishing, ouch, got me, or your music or your internet gaming receive an inordinate share of your time. Don't you agree that the time that we spend serving others in this body, teaching others, worshiping God, and meditating on His Word, that should receive a greater portion of our time than all of these other extraneous activities? Brethren, the gospel is so powerful, and it's so effective, and His promises are so great that we need to be all in this commitment that we make to God. As mentioned in a recent Bible class, we need to make sure we remember to keep the most important thing the most important thing. We need to remember to keep the most important thing the most important thing. I'll now turn it over to Jimmy now to review the scheduled Bible classes for 2023.
So we're very excited about the Bible class lineup for 2023. And if you haven't been attending the Bible classes, please consider doing so. This is where we can sharpen our tools and our tool belt on going out and spreading the gospel to those around us. We've got an excellent lineup for 2023, and we are off to a great start. As you know, this year we have added a second adult Bible class on Sunday mornings in the classroom number 5 in the back. And we're also having in the auditorium men team up to teach some of these classes as we go through them. We're also extending classes to multiple quarters so that we can dive a little bit deeper into God's Word and spend plenty of time in these studies. Each of these classes will allow us to develop our knowledge of God's Word and better equip us to spread the gospel to others at any opportunity that we might have. In this quarter 1, if you were here this morning, it was an excellent lesson. We're going through in the auditorium the book of Luke with Brother Ben Lee and Matthew Gardner leading that study. And then in the back classroom, Brother Dan Fontenot is leading a study on denominations, attitudes, and doctrines. And then on Wednesday night, we're going through a study of Hebrews led by Brother Kyle Slaybaugh and Matt Wallace. And just so excited about these classes. If you haven't been attending them, again, I would encourage you to do so. Then in quarter 2, did that change? Quarter 2, again, we're extending our Bible studies to multiple quarters. We're going to continue in our study of Luke on Sunday mornings in an auditorium. And again, 2 full quarters of these books to make sure that we can get all the details as possible out of these books. In the back classroom in quarter 2, which is classroom number 5, Brother Ryan Matney will be leading a study involving the understanding of cults and religions. And then again, on Wednesday, we will continue our study in Hebrews for the second full quarter of that book with Brother Kyle and Matt. As we go into quarter number 3, flip over from Luke, we start the study of Acts. With our focus on evangelism, we wanted to make sure that we covered this book of Acts. And Luke and Acts, I know, are my go-to books if I'm ever studying with someone, especially if they don't have a lot of knowledge about the Bible. So again, Sunday in the auditorium class, Brother Stu Kaufman and Steve Estes will be going through the book of Acts. In the back classroom, a topic that many people have questions about, the Holy Spirit. And Ben will be leading that study on that topic. On Wednesday in quarter 3, we're very excited about what we're calling the summer series. And our brother Kyle Slaybaugh has spent a lot of time and effort coordinating with a lot of the other preachers at congregations in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And what we're going to do is have many of those preachers come and bring a lesson to us on Wednesday nights. So they will essentially cover one chapter in 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus each week. In the month of July, we have Ricky Jenkins, Jerry King, Tim Jennings, and Jeremy Kuntz. Then in August, we have Eddie Caskey, Mark Roberts, Don Mitchell, Alberto Barrera, and Anthony Ginton. And then in September, we have Dan Bess, Stephen Baxley, Sean Briggs, and Daniel Lee. We're very excited about getting to hear some of the other preachers in the local area come in and bring us a lesson on 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. And then continuing on to quarter 4, again, the second full quarter, we're going to be on Acts here in the auditorium with Brother Stu Kaufman and Stephen Estes leading that discussion. And then in the back classroom, we'll be studying a study on the New Testament church led by Darren Martin and Adam McCullough. On Wednesday nights, Brother Ben Lee will be leading a discussion on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John and the book of Jude. You'll also notice one of the suggestions that came through the survey, again, thank you guys for that. You'll also notice that on the first Wednesday of each month, beginning next month in 2023, we will be making opportunities for the men of our congregation to present a short lesson during our worship period that precedes our Bible classes on Wednesday nights. On the first Wednesday of each month, we'll have one song instead of three, and then the 3 to 5 minute study, a biblical study, before we're dismissed in prayer and dismissed back to our Bible classes. So we're very excited about that, presenting an opportunity for men and young men, anyone who wants to develop their speaking talents, to do so on the first Wednesday of each month. Now hand it over to Brother Stu.
Let me put this on here. There we go. In addition to our regularly scheduled Bible classes and sermons, we plan to offer multiple group studies next year. Gospel meetings, congregational singings, weekend meetings, meetings to learn new songs. As I mentioned, the 6 singings, one of which starts next week, and weekly opportunities to participate in teaching others the gospel. We've listed the special studies. If you look in the trifold there on the inside there, the special studies are listed there. And beginning in the first quarter, January through March, we'll have the teacher education meeting, which we've mentioned before and is in the bulletin. Brother Charles and Dee Willis from New Caney, Texas, will be here Saturday and Sunday, January 21st and January 22nd. We'll have a focus on evangelism studies by Steve Estes and Benjamin Lee that will take place on 3 Sunday evenings in February, the 12th, the 19th, and the 26th. And in February, here comes one of those challenges that the other elders mentioned to you. We'd like every member to practice teaching the gospel to a family member. Why would we ask that? To a family member. Specifically, try and avoid some of that uneasiness that might come if you haven't had a lot of practice doing that. So we'd like you to teach one of your family members the gospel as if you would someone in the community. So when this will really prepare you when you do have that opportunity, and that opportunity will come, that God will provide that for us. So in quarter 2, 2023, we will, in April through June, we'll kick off the second quarter with a gospel meeting with Brother Brett Hoagland. That'll be April 2nd through the 5th. We'll also have a very, very interesting study, something we've hadn't done before, with young men and young women breakout sessions, focus studies, and Jimmy Farquhar and Braden Schleybaugh are going to lead the men, and Joanna Hunt and Allie Schleybaugh are going to lead the women on dating and choosing a mate. That'll be April 16th, 23rd, and 30th in 2023. In May, we'll have a weekend evangelism meeting with Daniel Broadwell. I'm really excited about this weekend. Daniel preaches down at Bel Air in Houston. He has some unique experiences in personal work, and we're very confident this weekend will help us all grow. So that'll be in May. And then Vacation Bible School will be held in the evenings in June. June 18th through 21st is the week designated for that. That'll be held in the evenings this year. And that where both adults and children are invited to attend. Wade Casey is the deacon that's going to coordinate that effort. He's asking that if you have interest in helping serve and helping participate to work with him on the Vacation Bible School, that you contact him. In the third quarter, July through September, we'll have multiple sessions that Hugh will lead us in and to learn and practice new songs for worship. That'll be in September. And then finally, in quarter 4, we'll start off that quarter with a gospel meeting, November 12th through November 15th with Brother Max Dawson. We'll hold several congregational singings this year on 6 different Sundays throughout the year at 5 p.m. Our first is actually next week, so mark your calendar for next week. 5 p.m. will be our first congregational singing. And those will be held January 15th, March 19th, May 21st, July 16th, August 20th, and October 15th. We're going to continue the weekly meetup studies that were mentioned earlier on Tuesday nights that happen at 7 p.m. That's a virtual study conducted on Zoom. Everyone is invited to attend that. And then in addition to those scheduled group events, there's going to be a weekly focus on those who are visiting our congregation and interested in learning the gospel of Jesus Christ. And those daily distribution leads that Stephen was mentioning, or that Tim was mentioning, those from TexasBibleStudy.com Google ads, we will continue to push those out to people who are interested in helping us make contact with those people who want to study the Bible. In addition to those additional special studies, we are going to have a couple of changes in the worship service that we wanted to bring to your attention. Next week, so January 15th, in addition to having the singing that week, we're going to change a couple of things in our worship service. Next week, we'll begin to pass the collection plates again. That may come as a little bit of shock to everybody. Oh no, we're passing something again. But we're going to pass the collection plates next Sunday, following the message of thanks and the prayer that follows that message of thanks. That's for a couple of reasons. One, it will allow the opportunity for our children to participate again in giving and serve as a teaching opportunity. As you'll notice, that's one of the things that has changed dramatically by having those boxes. Our kids haven't been able to participate. We want to start training them, allowing them to have that opportunity to develop that practice of giving to the Lord. So that'll be starting next week. Also, that will be when we place the visitor cards for our visitors. They'll place those in the collection trays when they go around, and we will not have the men, those young men, do that. We'll have some specific men that are designated. Will sit on the front rows, and we'll take those collection plates through the aisles, collect the visitor cards at the same time. As a side note, we will continue to use the Lord's Supper emblems as we do for that portion of our worship, so that portion of our worship will not change. And we welcome any questions you have about our theme, about the plans we have for the year in 2023, any suggestions you might have for any improvement. We believe that this year will be incredibly successful as we strive to be the sowers and reapers that Jesus wants us to be, to bring in that harvest to God. God brings the increase. All glory goes to God, but we are the tools that God uses. We love you. We love each and every one of you, our brothers and sisters, and we thank you for your dedication to the Lord, and we feel incredibly blessed to have the opportunity to serve you as elders here at West Main. Well, that concludes the presentation for the theme. With the remainder of our time, I want to take a few moments to dig a little deeper into the idea of turning the world upside down. As Stephen mentioned, that comes from the book of Acts, the 17th chapter, and in verse 6. But I want to begin by reading the broader context. So let's look at Acts, the 17th chapter, and we'll begin in verse 1 of Acts 17. Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul went in, as was his custom, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, and saying, This Jesus, whom I proclaim to you, is the Christ. And some of them were persuaded, and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a few of the leading women. But the Jews were jealous. And taking some wicked men of the rabble, they formed a mob, set the city in an uproar, and attacked the house of Jason, seeking to bring them out to the crowd. And when they could not find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers before the city authorities, shouting, These men who have turned the world upside down have come here also. And Jason has received them, and they are acting all against the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, Jesus. And the people and the city authorities were disturbed when they heard these things. And when they had taken money as security from Jason and the rest, they let them go. We can see from this text that Paul and his companions, they really had an impact on the world in which they lived. What was it specifically that was causing the disruption? Clearly there was a disruption. The whole town, the whole city was in an uproar. How were they turning the world upside down? As Stephen mentioned, the context tells us, if you look at verse 3 again, explaining, they were there in the Sabbath day in the synagogue, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, and saying, This Jesus whom I proclaim to you is the Christ. Teaching and reasoning and proclaiming, This Jesus whom I proclaim to you is the Christ. Do you see that connection? That's what was turning the world upside down. It wasn't them personally. It was what they were doing with the Word. Preaching, reasoning, explaining, proclaiming. We're going to spend a lot of time this year. Hopefully you saw that. We've put a lot of things together. And we're going to spend a lot of time this year thinking about this concept of turning the world upside down. No doubt, we will examine how the world itself is upside down and needs to be corrected, especially in those areas where man's arrogance and ignorance have been raised up against the knowledge of God. I'm sure we'll look at how attitudes, how thoughts, how our will, those things that are promoted by Jesus and his followers, those things are different from those that the world promotes, and how at times they may even be seen to be contrary to what we might think of as our own human nature. I'm sure we'll have discussions confirming the fact, as Stephen mentioned, that the world's really not upside down. It's the world that's upside down, I should say, and through our influence and our behaviors, we're turning the world right side up. But this morning, I want to approach this from a little different angle, a very personal perspective. Instead of talking about how we can turn the world upside down, I want us to consider the idea of our world being turned upside down. Because that actually has to come first. Before we can turn the world upside down, we must have our world turned upside down. And I'm sure you're all familiar with that expression. You've probably used it yourselves in talking about someone's life, describe something that may have happened to them, and then you may even comment on how it turned their world upside down. Perhaps it was some extremely significant event or an emotional event. Doesn't mean it's good or bad. As we reflect on life, I'm actually sure that we would say that getting married turned our lives upside down. I would certainly say that in my case. Donna had a great career. Seemed like forever in school and training, and we were singles for quite a while before becoming married. Well, we were set in our ways, and I will tell you, marriage definitely turned my world upside down until she kind of whipped me into shape. Most parents would probably say that having children turned their world upside down. And in reality, marriages and children are usually blessings. Yet not everything that can turn your world upside down is good. A divorce can turn your world upside down. A death can. This idea of turning someone's world upside down is not used to describe an event in one's life unless it causes a major change in someone's perspective or worldview, a paradigm shift, if you will. Thomas Kuhn actually coined that phrase related to science, paradigm shift. But it's used broadly to indicate a profound change in a fundamental model or your perception of events. Probably one of the most overused terms in business, by the way. But it's used frequently outside of the science world to indicate that there's been this profound change in perspective. It may be that we meet someone who has a profound impact on us, or we have some experience, something that causes us to reconsider how we have traditionally interpreted the way the world works and what our role is in the world. And there are numerous characters in the Bible who experienced this. We might think of an individual like Job, whose world was turned upside down when he lost his wealth and his health and his family, and eventually was challenged even in how he looked at and viewed God. We might think of a man like Abraham, who was called to leave everyone and everything he knew and to go into a place that God told him, wherever God would send him. Noah's world was turned upside down. Joseph's world was he had his world turned upside down. David went from a shepherd boy to the anointed one of God, the king of Judah, the king of Israel. His world was definitely turned upside down. And when we come to the Christians of the New Testament, we find they also had their worlds turned upside down. The Apostle John was described early in the gospel as the son of thunder, one who wanted to call down fire on the Samaritans. But later in his life, he's actually known as the apostle of love. The Apostle Paul, what a change he had. Changed from becoming a violent persecutor of the church and one who was advanced in Judaism beyond all of his contemporaries to one he states he gave up that heritage. He gave up that heritage and he counted it as rubbish so that he could gain Christ. He spread the gospel message in more places than anyone of whom we have a record. And that's quite a change. How did that happen? It was because of Jesus. The fishermen became fishers of men. That was quite a change. And it was certainly noticeable. Turn back in Acts, the 4th chapter, just a few chapters back. And in Acts 4, we have an interesting passage in which Peter and John had been imprisoned by the Sanhedrin Council because of the message that they were preaching. But what's really interesting in this section is the scripture in verse 13. Take a look at Acts, the 4th chapter, and in verse 13. So they'd been placed brought before the Sanhedrin. And in verse 13 it says, "Now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated, common men, they were astonished, and they recognized that they had been with Jesus." They recognized Peter and John were uneducated and untrained men. We would consider the words that were actually used in the Greek here offensive. The words are agrammatoi and idiotai. You hear where that word's going? They were uneducated idiots. They were ungrammared idiots. Based on their physical background, based upon their training, based upon their history, they were just that. They were uneducated idiots. But something had changed. Something had changed them. They weren't acting like uneducated idiots. The text says the Jews recognized them as having been with Jesus. Being with Jesus had changed them. Jesus had turned their worlds upside down. He had done the same thing for Jason and the disciples in Acts 17. Paul, when he writes about himself, sometimes spoke of the radical changes that took place in his life. At times he spoke of himself in the third person, perhaps out of humility, but he talked about those things, even from his own life, because it was important that we realize how much different Paul was after he came in contact with Jesus than he was before he came in contact with Jesus. To know and understand what Jesus did for him personally. Called himself the chief of sinners. And it's important that we understand that this did not end with Paul or the New Testament Christians, because we also have among us here. We have here in this very auditorium those who have had their worlds turned upside down by the gospel of Jesus Christ, like the disciples in Acts 17. We have members here who were not raised in godly homes, who did not have that focus in their lives growing up. We have those who grew up in a home that honored the world and not God. We have those who witnessed their parents' divorce at an early age. We have those who had entirely different sets of goals for life, who intended to live in a way that was consistent with what the world had to offer, but was contrary to what God desires for us. Those who were not spiritually minded before, but were seeking to find some happiness, some purpose in what the world offers. All of us, each and every one of us as Christians, who eventually came in contact with the gospel and were changed. And I am eternally, eternally thankful for that. It turned my world upside down. Where we are now compared with where we were, think about that, is almost unimaginable. Not because of ourselves, but because of Jesus and the impact that Jesus had on our lives. To be adopted into the family of God, to have Jesus living in us, to have his desires become our desires, his will become our will. That's what happened to every last one of us in this auditorium who are followers of Jesus. Jesus has turned our world upside down, and he has given us purpose. This year and beyond, we want to turn the world upside down. We want to live the gospel. We want to spread the gospel. We want to proclaim the gospel. And we hope you'll accept the challenges and the opportunities that will come your way, because they will. And we also know Satan's not going to like it. Satan will notice, and he will attempt to put barriers and obstructions and derail our attempts to turn the world upside down, to proclaim Jesus. Disappointment, discouragement, key tactics that Satan will use. You can expect him to work against our efforts. But the Lord will be there. I love this scripture in 2 Chronicles, where it says that his eyes are constantly running to and fro the earth, seeking to support those whose hearts are completely his. That's what God will do for us this year. And your brothers and sisters will support you. We are in this together. Together we will work to turn the world upside down. Would you pray with me? Our Holy Father, we praise you. We praise your name and thank you for the blessings we have in your Son, Jesus Christ. We thank you for loving us. We thank you for seeking us. We thank you for saving us, for turning our world upside down. Please help us. Please help us serve you with all of our being and to do our part in turning the world upside down. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. This morning, the first challenge is this. Have you been changed by Jesus? Has your world been turned upside down? Have you devoted your life to him? Have you been baptized for the remission of your sins? Or perhaps you're a Christian who has lost your way. Take this opportunity this morning to turn back to God. If we can help you in any way, please come as we stand and sing.